should be promoted. By doing so, technical cooperation can be more effective and yields tangible results on the ground. Last but not least, our CHR's Technical Cooperation Program must address human rights challenges posed by emergency situations, including conflicts and health emergencies. Building resilience and preparedness deemed necessary for the future, since we all would travel down the road that would never be the same road again. So I thank you, Moderator.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for this very comprehensive and very important highlight of the work of technical cooperation and the way forward. Thank you. C'est maintenant mon grand plaisir de présenter Madame Yvette Stevens, qui a été présidente du séminaire, des séminaires intersessionnels sur la contribution du Conseil des droits de l'homme à la prévention des violations des droits de l'homme. Je voudrais dire que Madame Stevens est bien au-delà de cela. Elle a été la pierre angulaire de tellement de négociations. Je crois qu'il serait difficile de les lister sur un morceau de papier. Et sa sagesse et sa vision du Conseil ont été saluées à de très multiples reprises. Donc c'est un grand honneur de l'avoir à côté de nous aujourd'hui au podium. Mrs. Stevens, the Council has certainly broadened the scope of its activities, as was mentioned by all previous speakers. If I were authorized to use a non-legal terms, and some of you know I love astronomy, I would certainly say that the Council resembles a galaxy with a core, the Council itself, and a myriad of objects gravitating around it, from special rapporteurs to investigating bodies, intergovernmental experts or working groups, panels, seminars, working groups, and of course the UPR. Mrs. Stevens, your experience of the Council has been impressive, and we would appreciate seeing you shedding lights on cases where you believe the work of the Council in the broader sense of the term has enabled particular human rights situations to evolve favorably and human rights crises to be averted. And in particular, would you mind developing further on what underlying conditions made this experience positive ones? You have the floor.
Thank you for that introduction, and let me also thank the President for inviting me to participate in this panel today. I would like to start with a quotation which was made by Ban Ki-moon in 2007. He said, all victims of human rights abuses should be able to look to the Human Rights Council as a forum and springboard for action. Simply put, Human Rights Council should be the voice of the voiceless. What has the Council done to enable human rights situations to evolve favorably? I will first look at the thematic area of work, because mainly we tend to look at the country situations. But let's look at the thematic areas of work of the Council. And the Council has done work on many thematic areas. If I am to name a few in which I was personally involved, for instance, the whole question of child, early, and forced marriages. Also looking at persons living with albinism, female genital mutilation, business and human rights, and the list is exhaustive. But what we haven't looked back is how has that affected the rights of people whom we're supposed to be looking after and considering. I would give one example, merely because I was involved from the very start. It's true that what you said, again, Eric, is that the Council is there and we have all these mechanisms sort of rotating around the Council itself. And what happens is that the Council passes a resolution, and then the mechanisms come into play. We have the special rapporteur on the independent expert. We have the UPR, all act in terms of monitoring the implementation and also in following up on those resolutions. In the a specific example which I want to give on persons living with albinism, I remember when we tried to bring this up to the Human Rights Council, it was not easy because some thought that there are too many independent experts already. Why don't we put this mandate under the special rapporteur for disabilities? And we were saying, no, but this is a bit different because people living with albinism were being not only discriminated against, but risk their lives in some countries where there is traditional belief that they have supernatural powers, and therefore parts of their body parts or themselves were being targeted for ritual killing. And this, I thought, was enough. This was enough to draw the attention of the Human Rights Council. This was going on. I mean, it was in the media, some press review, but the council had to take it up in order to be able to move on protecting the rights of people living with albinism. And this was exactly what happened. After 3 resolutions, and by the way, yesterday was the International Day of People Living with Albinism, this all came from this council. But more importantly, that setting up the independent expert on albinism has led to a lot of action being taken. For instance, specific measures have been taken at the field level, and a plan of action to end attacks on persons living with albinism has actually been taken up by the African Union. There are hundreds of mass awareness campaigns and events and activities. There has been research and data on the situation of persons living with albinism. Their health needs have been taken into account, and also the training of persons with albinism through multilateral engagement. And then there's been extensive pioneering work to tackle harmful practices related to accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks as a root cause of attacks on people living with albinism. This is work in progress, and it continues. But it's thanks to the work of this council that this voice is being given to the voiceless in this regard. We could quote examples from a lot of these thematic themes that have emerged from this council. But I just gave that as an example, and it's one which I know very well. I will now turn to country situations. And this, I think many people have mentioned it. The UPR is playing a great role, maybe even greater than it's being given credit for. Of the 87,278 recommendations, 73% were supported. Implementation of these would most certainly enable particular human rights situations to evolve favorably. When we look at some of the progress, and I'm sure, Mike, that the will be touching on this a lot. When we look at some of the what have emerged from this council, is that sometimes we play down. We say, okay, yes, there are all these. Let's look at one area, for instance, the area of ratification of human rights treaties. We might say, yeah, this country would have done it anyway. But I must say that the pressure that comes through the recommendations from the Universal Periodic Reviews have played a big role in getting countries to accede to some of these treaties. I looked, for example, at the Convention against Torture, which came into force since 1987. Of the 173 states that have ratified the treaty by 2001, 28 did so since 2006, partly due to the pressure of UPR recommendations, which means that 16% of the ratifications of the CAT happened after the Universal Periodic Review came into force. I personally participated in the UPR reviews of over 90 countries facing the second and third rounds of the UPR. The background reports show that recommendations are being implemented even if it is not at the desired level. This must surely have impact in the various countries. For my country, Sierra Leone, I know that following a brutal civil war and the focus on human rights and the building of human rights capacities have had a positive effect as a deterrent for a resumption of hostilities and conflicts. And the UPR recommendations are seen in this slide. Just as a bit of an anecdote, when I was home, I went to the market. So the market women, and there was somebody who came out and tried to educate me. Do you know about human rights? She was asking me. I was most amused because he said, I know my rights. And this is really remarkable. Everybody in my country know about human rights and their human rights. And this is thanks to the efforts partly through this Human Rights Council. There are various recently, my country abolished the death penalty. Now, that might seem, yes, another country. For my country, it has added significance in that in the past, so many people have been executed, sometimes even summarily, because of their involvement or suspected involvement in coup d'etats. So for us, this whole question of abolishing the death penalty assumes a significance which is just greater than, yes, okay, we stop it. For me, personally, I thought this was a great achievement. And it's thanks to, whilst I was still ambassador, we were still working towards it, thanks to a lot of pressure which was placed by this council on that. When it comes to there are various initiatives to follow up on reporting of the implementation of recommendations of the UPR, but it would be important to go beyond statistics to find out the impact that this is having on right holders. I was going to say, if this does not exist, there is a need for OHCHR or the advisory committee to do an evaluation of the accomplishments in countries thanks to UPR and other human rights recommendations. I learned that UPR Info has been doing some work in this direction, and I hope that Ms. Mona, Executive Director, would throw some light on this. The attempt made by Norway and Singapore, for instance, to allow for positive experiences to be shared under Agenda Item 10 should be supported and applauded. What was considered as success stories in some countries, when I look at individual country situations, what was considered as success stories in some countries through actions of this council, this situation have unfortunately deteriorated. Never, even if it is believed that the attention of the council led to improvements in human rights in the respective countries. This brings me to the point to my last point, which I will bring out, that the council needs to pay greater attention on prevention. And prevention, by prevention, I mean preventing human rights violations in the first place and not preventing situations deteriorating, but actually preventing that these situations do not deteriorate to a conflict or to a point where we would have to step in with special measures, etc. And this is what the council was itself aware that it needed to do more on prevention. And this was in this capacity that I was requested to be chair rapporteur of a group of 3 that were doing widespread consultations to look at how the country itself can enhance its role in prevention and its mechanisms. Now, this is all in line with paragraph 5F of Resolution 60/251. We did widespread consultations, were very, very widespread, and we came out with recommendations. The recommendations mainly relate to improving the rate of implementation of human rights recommendations, including the UPRs, and the setting up of a mechanism for early action. Resolution 4531 of this council has incorporated these recommendations, but action has not yet been taken on them. It is extremely important that the council does more in terms of making sure that the recommendations are implemented and that they are having an impact, and also that the council itself can intervene with early action before situations deteriorate. There are recommendations to that effect, and my hope is that these will be looked at carefully, and these actions need to be taken in terms of the good offices that the council could assume in certain situations before the persistent, consistent human rights violations lead to a situation of conflict. Thank you.